Hey everyone, welcome to our fifth episode of the Agile Fireside Chat. Welcome, it's nice to have you all with us today. My name is Arif, and together with me today is my co-founder at Humble Associates, TK.
Lovely to be here.
And I'm also joined by our guest today, John McGinnes. A warm welcome to all our viewers. Thank you so much for joining us and spending the next, hopefully, 45 minutes in an engaging conversation with our guest John and my colleague TK. So hello, welcome John. Thank you for being a part of today's fireside chat. We're really excited about today's conversation. I can't wait to see where we take it. Some interesting topics I know that we want to discuss. But just to kick us off, would you mind introducing yourself a bit to our viewers so they can learn a bit about you and what brings you here today?
Absolutely, thanks, Arif and TK, and I'm humbled to be invited as one of your guests, and I'm really looking forward to this chat because it is on a subject that's close to my heart. But yeah, so just to introduce me, my name is John McGinnes, and I work in talent development and have been in talent development, learning and development circles for nearly 25 years now. And to obviously give you an idea of my age, I do turn the grand old age of 50 this weekend. Hopefully I don't look it. I don't know, but I certainly. One of the best things, and it links very much to the topic we're going to discuss today, I don't actually feel it. And a lot of that is down to the approach to life that I take. I'm actually relishing the next, hopefully next 50 years, but we'll see what I do get. I currently work for a company called Control Risks, who are in the consultancy business, and again, the subject that we're going to talk about today, I think, is really integral to a lot of people that I'm looking to support and do support within our business primarily, so that they can really achieve all the sort of development goals they have that naturally feed into the kind of career progression and ultimately the career successes that they're looking to achieve. So I'm really looking forward to discussing this with you guys today, and I hope obviously all our listeners and joiners will enjoy the topic as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that introduction, John. Pleasure to have you with us. Why don't we get stuck in and hopefully, our viewers also are excited to hear more from you. So I think one of the things that we've been talking about, and I know you're keen to share, but before we do that, actually, sorry, I should just a signpost to our viewers. If you're interested in anything we talk about, and as you hear the conversation flowing, give us an emoji reaction and stick a comment or any opinions you've got in the chat. We'll be looking at that as we, go through the conversation over the next 40 minutes or so. And then if there's anything interesting, we'll pick it up and then either pose the question to John or reflect on it as part of the conversation. So yeah, please do whack in any ideas or thoughts in the chat as we go forward. So in terms of tonight's topic or today's topic, I know we've been talking a little bit, John, about how important mental health is to you, right? So I think just to introduce the topic and get us started with the challenges of let's frame it as post-pandemic, the workplace, amongst other things, it's a different world to what it used to be, and mental health is now typically at the forefront of employers' minds. But I think from our viewers' point of view, just tell us what does it mean to you, and why are you so important in the topic?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron.
Why are you so passionate about it?
Well, yeah, like you say, my interest fuels my passion, absolutely. And I think, I reflect on the state of the world, as you say, and obviously these, what are still very kind of tumultuous and challenging post-pandemic times. And I do feel there is still this, sort of reticence and almost still that bit of stigma around mental health. And I just sometimes I get very exasperated by that and wonder, why are we, still so embarrassed to talk about it, or feel that we can't talk about it, and where we don't maybe have that space to talk about it. And there are lots of sort of support that we almost constantly get signposted to. But sometimes it's that, I really just want to talk about it. I realize that there's things that can help me and support me, but just actually talking about it.
Yeah.
And I think language is very important. And if, certainly, what fuels my passion, and as I said to you, Arif, it's before, is, something that it's about a couple of months ago now. I saw an interview that Simon Sinek was having with Stephen Bartlett, and where he talked about changing the language from mental health to mental fitness. And it really resonated with me. And I thought, do you know what? By changing that language and actually thinking, yeah, it's more about what are my fitness levels like? And if I work on my fitness, because we talk about that very comfortably when it comes to our physical beings.
Yeah, we do.
And I think if we apply that language to our mental states and our mental well-being, then if we start to approach it that I'm working on my mental fitness as opposed to my mental health, I think that could really shift the needle somewhat and really push us and push all of us that need that support into that space where we feel we can talk about it more comfortably. We can recognize just what we want to work on in that respect, and actually just start to make those changes and actually start to improve that physical fitness. And sort of take our minds on that jog or run or walk, as well as our physical bodies.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a really good starting point for today's conversation, and I think you're posing some interesting thoughts there, especially this dichotomy, as you put it, around physical fitness, mental fitness. It's not seen in the same way, is it? That's a very good observation. I think I'd love to get stuck into that in a bit later in our conversation. But I think just framing it a little bit in terms of from your role and what you do at work, and what your main skill set is, and what you're seeing in the workplace as well, from a kind of talent point of view, people development point of view. I suppose and obviously this topic has energized you. So what are you observing? What are you seeing that's happening in the workplace that's maybe causing some of these thoughts to come up for you, and is giving rise to some of that passion?
Yeah, I think certainly what I'm observing and have done, and even pre-pandemic to a certain extent, because obviously life and times are challenging prior to the pandemic. Never mind where we face now. And I just find that what I'm seeing from people I'm having either discussions around the fitness of the mind, and as such it really is taking that effect of where I'm quite literally seeing people and having people saying to me, well, I'm almost finding it too challenging to deal with my day-to-day responsibilities and some of the stuff in my role, never mind taking on some of the development opportunities or things I really do want to be doing, and I want to invest in my career that way, but because of that physical state, just feeling far too fatigued to do it.
Wow.
And as we all know, the mind and the body are connected intrinsically. They're not separated from each other. If from a mental perspective you feel fatigued, that has a physical reaction on you. You start to feel lethargic. You start to feel like you just don't have the energy to approach anything. You maybe can't even think clearly. So naturally, you kind of just struggle through and do the best you can, but never mind thinking about all the other stuff that you maybe want to do, because it's just too, you just don't have the capacity for it. And there's times as well where we don't help ourselves physically. I mean, how many times, I've lost count of the number of days I've tried to survive on coffee and fresh air. We can all be guilty of that, can't we? That we don't fuel our bodies appropriately, and that's another big aspect of both mental and physical fitness. But because the mind, the power of the mind is so great, and if we're not keeping it agile, keeping it fit, and really working on those aspects, then it really does have I feel just a really quite, long-lasting detrimental effect to, as I say, what we want to pursue and what we want to do and how we want to develop in our careers.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Thanks for that, John. I'm curious. I think for our viewers as well, it'd be interesting to hear some stories. So, I think things that you've observed or experienced yourself, maybe that where you can point to and say that these are some examples of why I'm seeing poor mental fitness, or these are some examples of why I think you think increased mental fitness is important. I don't know if you want to share some. They don't have to be personal, obviously, but just to help our viewers, get a better feel for what we're talking about here. I think it would be really nice to get under the skin of some of that.
Always love a good story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, hey, we all love a good story, don't we? And it's the bedrock of society, storytelling. And I'm more than happy to share a personal story of my own. I will readily admit that I've had varying emotions about turning half a century. From it's almost like a grief process. Sometimes I'm in denial, sometimes I'll accept it, and so on. I feel very fortunate that I've kept myself in pretty good physical shape. But about 2 months ago, I realised that I wasn't in the shape I both wanted to be and needed to be. And I needed it to be. I needed to be truly honest with myself about that. And I was fortunate to, actually have a conversation with one of the PTs at my gym I go to. And he recognised, that something wasn't quite right with me. He said, and I think I benefit from the fact that he's a very blunt-talking Australian, and I think that's quite refreshing at times. But he literally said to me, he said, "What's going on with you?" He said, "You're doing here, and I see you doing stuff, but you don't look happy. You don't look happy with what you're doing."
Yeah.
And I said to him, "You know what? I really appreciate the fact that you've taken the time to speak to me, and in all honesty, it's the mental side of things. I'm really, really struggling. And I mentioned to him about the Simon Sinek video, and he said, "Well, why aren't you adopting that?" And I thought, that's such a good point. Such a good point. And from having that and then getting essentially a little bit of coaching from him in terms of my mental approach to things, and actually, just to yourself, change that language. I'm now working on my mental fitness as well as my physical fitness, and the two things align with themselves. And I've felt both mentally and physically in the last, like I say, 2 months to 6 weeks. I've actually felt the best I've ever felt in my life, and that is, it's no exaggeration, and it's no. I don't want to get hyperbolic about these things, but I honestly do, and it's such a huge thing, and it's certainly something I'm going to carry on. So that's that's me personally. Certainly from a professional point of view, I've had a number of conversations with people over the last few months, talking about development, how I can support them in my role, what are the opportunities for them, and and I've kind of done the same thing and actually tried to investigate with people as to from a mental point of view, what sort of what position you're in to actually deal with some of that, and it's become very clear that they actually don't feel they have the capacity, and so it's made the conversation steer in a very different way. Where we've investigated that a bit more, and I think one of the most obvious things you get from that, and we'll all relate to this, isn't it? You can almost see the physical change in people because of you're having that discussion with them. You see the body language change. You see that they're receptive to the fact that they can talk about these things, and that's because that mental shift is happening. It's almost like a weight is coming off the shoulders. And actually just feeling more positive about things because we're addressing the main thing that needs to be addressed, and actually being honest to say, look, I'm saying about doing these things, but I actually don't feel I'm in the mental state to take them on.
Yeah, that's really good stories, and thanks for sharing. Thanks for being open about your own stories as well. It's not easy. I know we talked. You may talk about stigma and things like that as well, and maybe we'll come to that later on. But I'm really curious about the workplace side of things for little bit longer, if we can, just
Sure.
stay on that. And again, back to your role a bit. I think it's you've had some conversations. Clearly, this is impacting people in the workplace. But what really stands out for me, what you've been saying so far, is, and I was noting it down, is that there is this differentiation about. It seems people are really struggling with the day-to-day work as opposed to even progressing their development. So there's this. I'm burnt out by just doing the day-to-day, and I can't even think about personal
Yeah.
development. That is pretty serious stuff, John. I mean,
Yes.
like I don't recognize that from the days when I was in employed work.
Absolutely. Yes.
It was a different time, perhaps, and we're not talking that long ago. But so the world is moving so fast. So, I mean, what are some of the factors that you think are having that impact on people not being able to do the development side and are just struggling with day to day? What can you tell us about that? I think our viewers would love to know a bit with the insight there.
Yeah, of course, and I think picking up on your point, Arif, where you say when you're in an employed position and it's maybe a while ago and things have changed. I think some of these things never change for me.
Okay. Fair enough.
I've worked, as I say, I've worked for over 25 years in learning and development. Certainly, at least 15 years in sort of as a capacity as a development coach for people in internal roles. So. Maybe people that are on a high potential track and
Yes.
working with them and so on. And one of the most common things I always find is where people, progress in their careers and they get, promotions into senior positions or more advanced positions, and they're still trying to do some of the stuff they did in their old roles.
Right. Okay.
And it's that letting go of things. And actually,
fascinating. Yeah.
and certainly with people I work with that are new to management roles.
Yes.
They have this sort of perception and sometimes self-imposed, or just what they guess is that I must still be seen to be doing lots and lots of things myself, rather than I'm actually strategically organising those things to be done. I'm delegating effectively. I'm ensuring that I'm handing over accountability and responsibility and some empowerment to others to deliver what the business is looking to deliver. As I say, for me, in my experience, a lot of people feel that it must have their name on that delivery as opposed to it actually just being delivered. And certainly, when having those conversations with people and helping them identify that, what, a lot of what you're doing, you shouldn't be.
You shouldn't be doing it. Yeah, that's it.
Shouldn't be doing it. And once they recognise that, and then, naturally, one of the next steps is, how to help them have the conversations to articulate that it needs to be handed over, and sometimes, like in a lot of situations, there's some upward management there. Having that conversation with their line manager as to what's happening. But when you start to see that happen, and when you start to see people, recognise, how necessary it is, from a if we think about it from a functional sense of, if you carry on doing that, it's unlikely you'll make the next step in your progression to another career management position, maybe, or if that's the path you want to take. But then ultimately, when people start to realise, freeing up that time and really investing in your own development, which naturally feeds into the strategic development for any organisation. I think it's a great thing. It's a great thing to see, great thing to be able to support on. And as I say, when you just see the change in people when they adopt that, that's when you start to see the energy levels rise. You start to see the the far better sort of decision-making process. And obviously with yourselves, guys, it's a bit. You start to see some of that agile coming in. They can pivot a bit more easily. They can accept some of the unknowns coming in, and they can accept those challenges and meet them head on, and not feel daunted by them. So it's, as I say, it's great to see when that change starts to happen.
And it's actually great to hear. And I think what you said is one of the sound bites and one of the outcomes I'll pull out for myself, which is, if you're in this difficult state, it's hard to challenge the way you work, the way you think, because you're in this place of survival, of trying to get yourself a better place, whereas actually you need to be in a full creative, your best self, to change the way you are, the way you think. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely, TK. And like you say, when you feel, I think you kind of hit it perfectly there. It's that, when you're feeling in that state, it's maybe like you do feel a bit cornered in that state, and it is naturally that fight or flight response that's invoked in all of
Yeah.
us, and that's what happens maybe. So it's maybe that, fighting in sense of constantly ranting and raving about how rubbish the situation is, or retreating and not talking or not saying anything about it and suffering in silence, which is, neither is a good position. And as I say, for me, it really does come down to that. If we can be prepared to have the conversations and know that we can have them in a very open, honest, and trusting way, then that is just going to be to the benefit of everybody.
I think we got John on the wrong event, haven't we, TK? We got our agile leadership event next week. We should have invited.
We might do some invitations
John
there.
today.
Yes.
I'm available.
You're available.
I have a very empty diary. I have no social life now that I'm turning 50.
Oh dear.
Not the best,
Well,
hopefully.
we may take you off. We may take you off on the offer, but no, some really, really great insights there, John, that you're sharing. And I think there's something fascinating there around. You talked about the delegation aspect, the letting go, this inner need to feel like you have to, like you said, put your name on things. That is just, there's something there. And it brings me to I wanted to talk to you a little bit about leadership and in terms of their responsibility, leaders being responsible for creating the environment to make it safe to have these type of conversations, or to make it comfortable for employees to start talking about their mental fitness, as we've called it. And again, on that one, since it links quite nicely, what are you seeing or not seeing perhaps in the workplace, or maybe even in terms of people development trends generally? What are your thoughts on that? And where is the state of play in your mind?
Yeah, I'm really glad you've asked that, Arif, because I find myself in I suppose, a little bit of a state of, I'm a bit perplexed by it. I see some fantastic examples of it where I currently work. From senior leaders in our business, being sort of role models for that behaviour, being very humanized about it, and actually showing and displaying their personalities, their true personalities, on a regular and consistent basis. Yeah. And as I say, I find myself wondering, why isn't that having the impact that it maybe needs to with others? And I think at the moment I'm kind of resting on the fact that, even though people are seeing our senior leaders a lot in our business,
yeah,
they're still only seeing them on this platform,
right,
on a video call and online. And even though we're very used to it now, because obviously having to adopt to it through the pandemic if we weren't used to it before, and so on, I think that's maybe where the disconnect still lies. And there is this, as humans, to obviously lesser or greater extent, some of us are a bit more comfortable, being on our own and not interacting with lots of people and so on. But ultimately, as humans, we need that physical, in-person interaction with each other. And I think that's possibly what's missing. And certainly, within my role where I currently am, I'm working with various teams and various people to try and get some of those physical interactions in place, and and I think and there's a great reception to it, where I am, where in my current role. Like with anything, it's obviously some logistics that come into that. We're a global organisation, and mine is an EMEA regional role, so we have some challenges around that. But the thing that encourages me the most is that it's something that the business themselves has recognised. As I say, senior leaders, when I've had the discussions with them, they feel the same thing. They don't feel they're having the connection they want to have with people in the business. So they really want to try and make these things happen, and we've started to do that through this year. We're continuing. We're starting to have more events. It's a really, for me, as I say, I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at other situations. I think that is where the disconnect is for me. It's just the fact that still
Do
we
you
are
think
online.
do you think there's something there where, okay, since you've touched this remote, hybrid, in person, whatever way we look at it, but do you think that this post-pandemic shift in workplace, in working pattern, right? Now we're either in hybrid mode or fully online mode or fully remote mode. Is that where some of this behavior that we talked about earlier is coming from, in terms of this feeling of, well, I've got to be seen to be doing work because I'm
Oh yeah.
not in front of people. People aren't seeing me do the work. I need to be seen to be doing it, if that sort of makes
Yeah,
sense. And therefore, I've got to be doing more, and maybe I'm burning myself out. Is that where you think some of this is coming from?
yeah, absolutely, Arif.
That's fascinating.
I believe that, and
Wow. Okay.
I've been a bit guilty of that myself. Being in that sort of frame of mind of, people physically can't see me, but digitally they need to see what I'm doing. They need to see some of those outputs, whether it be, through the emails I'm sending or the stuff I'm creating, or, so many different things.
Yeah.
But I think it's, is it a human trait in all of us? Potentially. Is it because of the environment and the way society is? You have to say that does have an impact, because we're all influenced and affected by society and culture. And absolutely, I think, if we the first step on that is recognizing it, and then being able to talk about it openly, honestly, and in a space where we know there's not going to be maybe the judgment or the recrimination around it. And recognizing for all of us that it's part of being human. We are all, we all have our faults, we all have our quirks, we all have our things that define us as humans, and it's about embracing all of our individual traits in that way.
Definitely. Okay. No, it's really interesting, and that's a shame that that's happening, of course, for your colleagues in your workplace. But it sounds like you're doing some great work to try and shift the dial on that one. So keep going, John. But that's some really fascinating insights into what's happening in the workplace right now. So thank you. We talked about agility. Let's come to that then and explore that a little bit. And I think some of the things that you already talked about fit in a little bit into this conversation. So let's just reference those. So we've talked again about this idea of leaders not delegating, for instance, right? Or we've also talked about having increased mental fitness means that perhaps we are coming into the workplace more ready, more willing, more open-minded to new things. Both of these really crucial. So if we talk about agility, we're talking about it hinging on a couple of things, or a number of things, but some of those that we've just talked about there include, team collaboration, team dynamics, and in an agile team where you're relying on other skills within a team to help you deliver on a goal, then delegation is critical. So if leaders are not in a position where they're able to delegate to a team, decision making gets slowed down, and other things happen as an impact of that. So, what are your thoughts there? So, I don't know if you are obviously at Control Risks, what the conversation is like around moving towards agile ways of working. But even if you're not ready yet, what are your thoughts there, and how can we help teams, organizations, leaders move in that direction to make transitioning to agility far easier?
Yeah, great sort of area there, Arif. And again, I think the starting place has to come from being prepared to fail, or being prepared to accept that it might not go right from the beginning. Again, it's not a bad thing to have that. We want things to be really good, and we want them to be, we strive for perfection. We want, we want to deliver great quality. But the one thing that a lot of us don't seem to be prepared to accept is that that doesn't happen straight away. It doesn't happen overnight. You need time. You need to be prepared to actually. Oh crikey, yeah, that didn't go very well, did it? But what have we learned from that? And if you look, anywhere you look where you think someone that's been successful in any area, one of the common things they have is that lots of things haven't gone right.
Yes.
It's many variations and many trials and many kind of blueprints before they've hit on the one that is actually going to be successful and actually
Right.
progressing in that way. So certainly, where I'm working, in my role is to work with not just the senior leaders, but sort of managers, anyone in a leadership position, is to, when it comes to that, if we're looking to delegate and hand some accountabilities and empowerment to people,
Yeah.
what are the opportunities for them to essentially have a go at things to develop the skills?
Yeah.
And then again, what's crucial is have that space to, okay, let's review and
Yes.
let's see, what do we learn from that, and then that helps us identify, okay, so that's maybe where the main development area is. So how do we then progress on that way?
It's
And I
almost
think,
like a test and learn approach. It's very, very agile in a way, to try and experiment, test something out. If we delegate this, what happens? If we, tweak, yeah. So that's what we're talking about. Brilliant. I love that.
well, absolutely, and I think if you bring it back to when we were all kids,
Yes.
we just test and learn without even thinking about it,
That's
didn't we?
it.
That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And
It's funny we stop
if
doing that when we get adults, don't we? That's the
well,
thing.
we do. We
Yeah.
do, and it's the complexities of the adult world, isn't it? But
Yeah.
I think certainly, and as I say, I think like a lot of organisations, one of the key things I'm doing with it, and what forms my conversations with people is, getting them to reflect on what we do from an external perspective. We do lots of fantastically agile and complex work with a lot of our clients. And it's about replicating some of that internally.
Internally, yeah.
Looking at how we deliver it externally, there's no reason not to do that internally naturally.
That
But I
old
think
adage of eating your own dog food, isn't it?
Yeah.
exactly, and as I say, I like you guys as well, no doubt. Been in many organisations where that's what goes on. We don't do the things internally that we do fantastically well for our client base. So certainly, as I say, some of the shifting is absolutely happening where I am now, and it's and certainly those opportunities for people, maybe embarking on their careers, or certainly the more less experienced, are getting those opportunities now, and certainly from a lot of the feedback I'm getting and being involved in ongoing conversations, it really is making a difference. And people are relishing the opportunities and then really running with them.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Amazing. I think just leading on from that, then I think since you're talking about shifts and changes, from an organizational point of view, again, if we're looking at organizational change or transformation, and if there's changes that the business is expecting to happen in the workplace in terms of ways of working, process, whatever it might be, just linking back to where we started around mental fitness, right? So, in your view, how important is having mental fitness? And if it is, I'm guessing you'll say yes. But how do you cultivate that? How do you improve that for staff so that when they're experiencing change, they are ready for it? What would you say to that?
Yeah, thanks, Arif. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I agree. For me, it is absolutely crucial to success moving forwards. Because without that state of mental fitness and that ongoing, investing in your fitness, then ultimately, people aren't going to be able to be in the right headspace, have the right mindset to take on those challenges. And I think, what I would say about us being able to be in the position where we can, be working on our fitness on an ongoing basis, and ensuring that, we are, able to take on those challenges. It really is about, openly talking about it and having those conversations, really bringing it to the forefront that, we are talking about mental fitness as part of our overall fitness for work and our careers. And I think as well is, where people, sort of model the behaviours that we expect of others to do that. And I am absolutely encouraging, again, and having conversations with, managers and leaders within the business to be, sort of maybe show their vulnerable side around that and say where they've had challenges, so that they can demonstrate to people maybe less experienced than them that it's not just a case of biding your time until you've done 15 years of your career and it's all suddenly going to click into place.
Oh, yes.
They still face some of those challenges. They still face some of those uncertainties themselves. And by being prepared to have the conversation and, as I say, be open and honest, and then sort of model the behaviours that we would have want others to adopt to be effective, I think, again, that's the way that we really do kind of shift the needle, move things forward, and really, create the space for those, what are essentially limitless possibilities to me and opportunities for people to really make those strides.
Amazing, thank you. So it's an ongoing process. It's something you need to be intentional about. You need to work on it proactively, and obviously, as you said, when you're faced with some challenge, if you're not in the right space, you can't just instantly do anything about that, right? That's what we're talking about here.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, having that space to say, and I think, leaning into the human side of things. I shared that, I've had a great kind of 6 to 8 weeks and working on my fitness and both mentally and physically, but I've had days where it hasn't felt very good, and I think again, you have to again, we can all be our own harshest self-critics, can't we?
No, I think there's something that you mentioned. I think for this to really work, I suppose you need to be in a position where you're able to openly chat about it, and so that, again, we go back to leaders, right? And so I was going to say is how are leaders creating an environment where it's okay for staff to then come and say, look, I'm not feeling great today. I'm feeling a bit low because of these reasons. Just give me a bit of extra space to get my work done, or whatever the conversation is. How can we encourage that more?
Yeah, again, I think it comes from the open dialogue, Arif. Senior leaders, saying to teams of, I've not had a great day today, or I've not had a great week, whatever it might be. Again, just recognizing that it's something that happens to all of us. It is intrinsically human to have not such a great day. It happens, and kind of lean into it for what it is. Because the other thing about it is, if you don't appreciate in some ways those not so great days, then the days that are great, or you're maybe not prepared to say, yeah, the greater days are coming.
Yes.
And I know that.
Yeah.
You kind of get stuck in that negative cycle of, the bad days are here to stay, and it is just what it is.
It's funny. I saw it's funny you said that. I was on online earlier, and I saw a video from Tony Robbins, and he was talking about three P's, and one of them was pervasiveness. So he said you got to battle the 3 P's. I can't remember the other 2. Pervasiveness was one, and he described it as this belief that this problem is pervasive, that it's always there, and it's never going away. So that's bang on in terms of exactly what Tony was talking about. And he's someone obviously who knows what he's talking about when it comes to some of this.
Well, absolutely. I think it's those ways of thinking, isn't it? And we have like catastrophizing things, and
exactly.
As you say, that pervasiveness of in our own minds and thoughts is that this is a permanent state, that it's bad.
Yes, permanent. That was the other one.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that people don't suffer things and things can be really, really bad. Of course they can. But ultimately, it's about recognizing that, generally for all of us, those bad days don't last forever. And it's about, and even when you start to think that way differently and more positive, that change, that shift in energy can start to make those bad days disappear quite quickly.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's really Really good stuff, and yeah, chimes a lot with what I was just saying there, and yeah, aligns nicely. Just coming up towards the end of our conversation, sadly, but a couple
I
of things.
know,
Yeah, I
gosh,
know it's gone
it's
fast. I
fine.
know it's gone fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a question in the chat from Zach, and he's mentioned marginal gains, and now I don't know if you have any thoughts or opinions or
Oh,
comments on that. What
absolutely.
it Go on. You're
Yeah,
chomping at the bit. I'll let you go.
I
Go
am,
for
because
it.
again, thank you, Zach. I'm a huge proponent of marginal gains, and in particular, Matthew Said does some
Yes.
great TED talks about marginal gains, and it is this again as humans. Because sometimes we get told it, don't we? It's like, things like if you shoot for the moon, you'll still hit the stars, and it's about reaching really far and wide straight away. And if it doesn't happen as soon as we think it should, then we get, we get we get demotivated. And we think, oh, it's never going to happen. But ultimately, taking marginal gains, these incremental steps, and again, what I feel is crucial, Arif, is actually taking the time to recognise just how many steps we've made and how far we've gone on a journey. Because sometimes we don't recognise it, we don't think we've gone far at all. But if we take the time to reflect and see just how many steps we've made and just how many step changes we've made and the improvements through marginal gains, it really shows us, gosh, I've achieved a lot. And then that naturally spurs us on to, right, well, I'm going to keep going, and I'll keep going, and I'll keep going. So yeah, absolutely. I think marginal gains, and especially with development, it's such a great mindset to get ourselves in, and it's that whole development growth mindset by approaching it with marginal gains that really does get us. It's certainly in my experience to pretty much all those targets I want to get. If I link it to my own sort of personal fitness, mental and physical over these last 8 weeks, that's all been through marginal gains.
So there is something about being intentional, noting what you're doing, seeing what change has been made, being very conscious, aware of that, and then what's the next thing I'm going to try? Right, that's what it's about.
Absolutely, and I think really key word from you there, Arif, is that intentional. Am I consciously thinking about my intent? And like you say, am I maybe noting it down? What things work, and different things work for different people. I'm not a great note taker per se, but I'm a great sitting down and reflector kind of person. Whatever works for you, and maybe try different things, but
try different things.
Really, that intentional is such a key word.
Brilliant, thank you, thanks, John. Okay, so the last thing I would like from you for our viewers is, if they were to leave this conversation and our event today with nothing else, just 3 tips for if you're in the workplace, maybe you're a leader, maybe you're not, but when it comes to how you can improve your mental fitness, 3 things that you'd like to talk about, or you'd like them to remember as they leave today's conversation. Can you share that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say the first one is be prepared to change. If you recognize that things aren't working, or they're certainly not what you want them to be, it needs change. Probably my favorite quote of all time from Einstein is where he said, the very definition of madness is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting different results. And that has stuck with me ever since I first heard it. And it is absolutely correct. If you carry on doing the same things, you're going to be in the same situation and the same results. So it's about recognizing that when it's time for change and being prepared to make that change.
Okay.
The other thing is, don't do it on your own. The whole lone wolf theory or whatever. Some people are naturally a bit more maybe self-resilient and can do things on their own. But ultimately, we all need the support of others,
other people,
or other resources to help us on this journey.
Nice.
So don't think of it as any kind of frailty, any kind of weakness, all those really negative words and language. It's about, no, I'm investing in my development, I'm investing in my improvement, and I want to get others to help me on that journey. And then I'd say that the last one, Arif, is, be kind to yourself. Recognize that, just because maybe things haven't gone quite right, or you've not achieved what you wanted to set out to, it's not that you're, incapable of doing it or you'll never get there. It's just that, you need to try something else, or you need to move on. It's really important to be kind to yourself, because otherwise you will drag yourself down into that negative space, retreat, a bit like we said about earlier, and think, well, I'll give up and I'll just carry on doing what I'm doing. Even if I'm not happy about it and I don't like it, I don't like the situation I'm in,
Yeah.
Because I've, and again, all the things we say to ourselves, all the, sometimes really terrible things we say to ourselves about how bad we are, it's about, not accepting those and being kind to yourself.
Amazing, amazing. Thanks, John. That's some really great insights. So, as a summary, be open to change. Don't do things on your own. Get some help with you, and obviously being kind to yourself. Those are the three things John wants you to take away from today's conversation. Okay, so I think that brings us nicely to the end. We're a minute over. So before I let you go, and to the viewers as well, we need to share what's happening, what's coming up. But a big thank you to John for sharing 45 minutes of his time with us. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and love listening to his insights. I did, and TK did as well, I'm sure. So our next Agile Fireside, and I'm sure it's going to be coming up on the screen any moment now, is on the 13th of July. We'll be interviewing, or rather speaking to, Christian Martinez. Christian is a finance automation expert, totally left it, different segment, different sector. We're going somewhere totally different. He's in the world of finance, but he has a strong passion for agility, AI, automation, all things like that. So we're going to have a fascinating discussion to see how all this intersects together, and how he's demystifying the boring world of finance with some of his cool ideas. So do join us on the 13th of July for that event, one not to miss, I'm sure. Will be lovely to hear some of his thoughts on some of this cutting edge technology and agility and how it all meshes together. And of course, our usual regular audio event is back tomorrow. We'll be hosting our Humble Breakfast Jam every Friday, 10 a.m. BST, so UK time. Join us for an audio conversation. You get to interact with us and be part of the conversation too. And everything else is on our LinkedIn profile. So have a look at our LinkedIn page, Humble Associates LinkedIn page. You'll see a list of events there and upcoming things. So check all of that out. That's all we've got time for. A big thank you again to John. Thank you to our viewers for joining us and being a part of the conversation, and for your comments and opinions. We love to hear that all the time. And we'll see you next time for our next Fireside on the 13th of July. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.